My daughter had no idea her poor mother was worth millions. And that wasn't the only secret I was hiding. If you've ever kept a truth so big it could change how your own child sees you, then you already know the weight I carried. For years, my daughter, Melissa, believed I was just an old, tired woman scraping by. A small rented apartment in Asheville, North Carolina, a beat-up blue sedan that coughed louder than it purred, and thrift store clothes that smelled faintly of lavender detergent. That's all she ever saw. That's all I ever let her see. But behind that quiet simplicity was something she could never have imagined. An inheritance, investments, and a fortune her father left behind that grew into millions. And I never told her. Not once. Because sometimes money destroys people faster than poverty ever could. So when Melissa called one Sunday afternoon, her voice unusually excited, saying, "Mom, I want you to come to dinner to meet Daniel's parents," I froze. You'd think a mother would be thrilled to meet her son-in-law's family, right? But something in her tone made my stomach twist. She sounded nervous, like she was trying to convince herself this dinner would go well. I said yes, of course, but I didn't tell her what I was planning. See, for years, Melissa's in-laws had subtly judged me. Through gifts I didn't need, fake smiles and little comments like, "You raised such a polite daughter. She must have learned refinement from somewhere." You know the kind, those words that sound like compliments but feel like paper cuts. So this time I decided to test them, to see who they really were. I went to my closet, pulled out my oldest floral dress, one with a faded hem and missing button, and thought, let's see how they treat a poor, naive woman. Because here's what they didn't know. I could buy the very street they lived on if I wanted to. But I wasn't after revenge or pride. I wanted truth. I wanted to see if my daughter had married into a family that judged worth by appearances. That night, as I ironed the dress and looked at my reflection, I whispered, "This dinner might change everything." And I had no idea how true that would become. Because that single evening, one polite invitation would unravel decades of secrets, old betrayals, and a truth I wasn't ready to face. A truth that began long before Melissa was even born. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner, you need to understand who I was before that night and the secret life I'd been living all along. Because once you know that, you'll understand why I had to pretend. But tell me something first. If you were in my shoes, would you hide your fortune from your only child just to keep her humble? Comment yes or no. I really want to know what you do. From the outside, my life looked like something out of a quiet, small-town story, the kind people forget after passing by. A one-bedroom cottage on the edge of Black Mountain, paint peeling near the porch rail, the kind of place where wind chimes replace doorbells. Every morning, I brewed cheap coffee, read yesterday's newspaper, and drove my old sedan, a silver 2006 Corolla, to the grocery store where everyone knew my name. I leaned simply. And honestly, I liked it that way. Melissa never questioned it. She thought her father's passing left me barely surviving. I let her believe it because I wanted her to value kindness, not comfort, to build her own life without shortcuts. But behind that simplicity was the truth. After my husband, Gerald, died, I thought he left me with nothing but memories and debt. Until one day, a man in a gray suit showed up at my door. He said, "Mrs. Wilkes, your husband's former partner left you something before he passed." I almost laughed. "You must have the wrong person. We barely had a savings account." He handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a letter and a key. That key opened a safety deposit box in Charlotte, filled with stock certificates and investment documents worth more than I could comprehend. It turned out Gerald had quietly invested in a renewable energy startup with his partner before he died. That startup grew, and eventually got acquired by a major firm. The dividends alone brought in around $40,000 a month. I sat in my car for hours that day, crying not from joy but disbelief. I'd spent years budgeting groceries, skipping vacations, and telling Melissa, "We can't afford that." And all that time, I could have bought her the world. But I didn't tell her. Because deep down, I remembered how money had changed people in my past, turned love into competition and friendship into envy. I wanted Melissa to grow into her own woman, unshaped by greed. So I built a quiet life. Simple house, simple car, simple clothes. But behind that plain curtain was a secret fortune. And the only thing that connected me to my real past was a gold locket, small oval with a photo of Gerald inside. He gave it to me on our 10th anniversary, the night he promised, no matter what happens, this will always lead you to the truth. I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. That locket became my anchor, the one thing that reminded me who I was before the lies, before the secrets. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hold it in my hand, whispering, "What truth, Gerald? What did you mean?" But I never got an answer. Not until that dinner. Because that small locket, that quiet piece of gold I wore around my neck every single day, would later reveal something I wasn't ready to face. And when I say it changed everything, I mean everything. I still remember the sound of the rain that night. It wasn't heavy, just steady enough to feel like the world was whispering a warning I didn't understand. I stood outside their home, a 2-story house in Maplewood, New Jersey, glowing warm through tall windows. It looked like something out of a real estate magazine. Trimmed hedges, polished porch lights, a front door painted deep navy blue. Everything about it screamed, "We have taste. We have money." I smiled to myself. Perfect. That was exactly what I needed for this little experiment. I took one last look at my reflection in the car window. My second-hand cardigan, faded jeans, the same worn leather purse I'd had for 10 years. My hair tied back simply. I didn't look like someone who earned $40,000 a month. I looked like someone who leaned off coupons and grocery store coffee. Exactly how I wanted it. As I walked toward the door, I could almost hear my daughter's voice from earlier that week. "Mom, don't overthink it, okay? They're nice people." Nice. I had to bite back a laugh. Nice is what people say when they're unsure. The door opened before I could knock twice. A tall man stood there, Harold, my son-in-law's father. Perfect posture, starched shirt, a smile that never reached his eyes. "Ah," he said, looking me up and down, "you must be Melissa's mother." The way he said must made it sound like he was confirming a rumor. "Yes," I replied, matching his politeness. "And you must be Harold." He nodded. Come in, come in." The house smelled faintly of rosemary and polished wood. I saw Patricia before I heard her. She floated out of the kitchen in pearls and a smile too sweet to be real. "Oh, you're adorable," she said, her tone laced with something I couldn't quite name. "Melissa told us, you leany simply." I love that. Leany simply. I tucked that phrase into my pocket like a piece of evidence. They led me into the dining room. Every corner looked carefully curated. The gold-edged plates, the crystal glasses, the centerpiece of fresh lilies. Melissa and her husband, Daniel, were already seated. She smiled when she saw me, that kind of pure, excited smile that made everything else fade for a moment. "Mom, you made it." I hugged her, trying to push away the uneasy feeling crawling under my skin. Daniel looked uncomfortable, polite but quiet. His hand gripped his wine glass a little too tightly. Dinner began small. Weather, jobs, the traffic on I-78. Patricia's laughter came too easily. Harold's questions were sharp but wrapped in velvet. "So, tell us," Harold began. "What do you do, Mrs.?" "Grace," I said. "Just Grace." He smiled thinly. "Grace, what do you do for a living?" "Oh, I just manage," I said softly. "A little of this, a little of that. Nothing impressive." Patricia leaned forward. How inspiring. So humble. Something in her eyes flickered, not admiration. Something closer to amusement. I felt the urge to let them know who I really was. The successful investor, the woman with multiple real estate holdings across 2 states, but I stopped myself. That wasn't why I was here. I wanted to see how they treated someone with nothing to offer them. As the evening went on, Patricia's comments sharpened just a little at the edges. Melissa said you raised her on your own after your husband passed. That must have been tough. Oh, and she said you rent, not own? It's brave, really, at your age. People like you have such strong hearts. I could never lean you like that. Every word was dipped in honey, but I could taste the venom beneath. And yet, something else began to stir in my chest. Not anger, pity. Because I saw it, behind her perfect pearls and practice tone, Patricia was nervous. Her gaze kept darting, not at me, but at something I was wearing. Her eyes flicked toward it again and again, her smile faltering for half a second each time. When I finally noticed, a chill ran down my spine. I caught her whispering something to Harold, and the way his jaw tightened told me it wasn't about the food. I tilted my head slightly, pretending not to notice, even as I felt the weight of their eyes pressing down on that small piece of gold hanging from my neck. That locket, the one my late husband had given me on our 10th anniversary, suddenly felt heavier than ever. And when Patricia looked up again, her face was pale. I smiled sweetly. Is something wrong, dear? She blinked, forcing another smile. No, of course not. I was just admiring your necklace. It's lovely. But her voice cracked on that last word. I didn't know why then. But that locket, that one small piece of gold, was about to tear everything open. That night, I went home smiling, unaware that the game I'd started would soon turn on me. Dinner continued like a performance, where everyone knew their lines, but not the ending. Patricia poured more wine than anyone needed. Harold kept asking questions, framed like compliments, but meant to measure. It's wonderful how your daughter made something of herself, he said, smiling at Melissa. A teacher, right? Not an easy field. He turned to me. Did you ever dream she'd marry someone with Daniel's prospects? I laughed softly, keeping my tone gentle. I only dreamed she'd marry someone kind. Patricia's fork froze midway to her lips. For a moment, silence sat at the table, like a guest no one wanted to acknowledge. Melissa laughed nervously. Mom, you always say that. Yes, I said quietly, because it's true. That was when Patricia's eyes sharpened, just slightly. I could see it, the shift from polite hostess to quiet judge. The rest of dinner blurred into small talk and veiled jabs. At one point, Patricia told a story about a charity gala. Oh, we raised over $20,000 that night. It's so fulfilling to help those less fortunate, don't you think? She looked straight at me when she said it. I smiled. Yes, I always say generosity reveals a person's soul. Harold chuckled, low and stiff. Well said. But Patricia didn't smile. When dessert came, she leaned back, watching me with that same cautious interest. Then, with her voice calm and curious, she asked, Grace, may I ask something personal? I looked up, meeting her gaze. Of course. Her lips curved into what might have been a smile. Do you ever worry Melissa married too far above her upbringing? Melissa froze. Daniel's glass clinked against his plate. For half a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I smiled, the same way I did when Melissa fell off her bike years ago, and I had to stay calm for her sake. Why would I? I said gently. Love doesn't measure distance. Patricia blinked, surprised by my calm. But I wasn't calm. Inside, my hands were shaking under the table. I could feel it. This wasn't about social status. Patricia was testing me, watching me, trying to see if I'd crack. And I didn't know why. When dinner finally ended, Daniel and Melissa excused themselves to clean up in the kitchen. Patricia followed me to the living room. Would you like some coffee before you go? She asked, her voice smooth. I hesitated. Sure. We walked toward the kitchen together, but halfway there, she stopped. Her tone shifted. You're not who you say you are you? I froze. What do you mean? She leaned closer. That necklace. I've seen it before. My heart slammed in my chest. It's just a gift from my late husband. Her smile vanished. Yes, I know. For a moment, silence sat at the table, like a guest no one wanted to acknowledge. Melissa laughed nervously. Mom, you always say that. Yes, I said quietly, because it's true. That was when Patricia's eyes sharpened, just slightly. I could see it, the shift from polite hostess to quiet judge. The rest of dinner blurred into small talk and veiled jabs. At one point, Patricia told a story about a charity gala. Oh, we raised over 20,000 that night. It's so fulfilling to help those less fortunate, don't you think? She looked straight at me when she said it. I smiled. Yes, I always say generosity reveals a person's soul. Harold chuckled, low and stiff. Well said. But Patricia didn't smile. When dessert came, she leaned back, watching me with that same cautious interest. Then, with her voice calm and curious, she asked, Grace, may I ask something personal? I looked up, meeting her gaze. Of course. Her lips curved into what might have been a smile. Do you ever worry Melissa married too far above her upbringing? Melissa froze. Daniel's glass clinked against his plate. For half a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I smiled, the same way I did when Melissa fell off her bike years ago, and I had to stay calm for her sake. Why would I? I said gently. Love doesn't measure distance. Patricia blinked, surprised by my calm. But I wasn't calm. Inside, my hands were shaking under the table. I could feel it. This wasn't about social status. Patricia was testing me, watching me, trying to see if I'd crack. And I didn't know why. When dinner finally ended, Daniel and Melissa excused themselves to clean up in the kitchen. Patricia followed me to the living room. Would you like some coffee before you go? She asked, her voice smooth. I hesitated. Sure. We walked toward the kitchen together, but halfway there, she stopped. Her tone shifted. You're not who you say you are you? I froze. What do you mean? She leaned closer. That necklace. I've seen it before. My heart slammed in my chest. It's just a gift from my late husband. Her smile vanished. Yes, I know. For a moment, the room went silent, too silent. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the muffled laughter from the kitchen, the rain outside growing louder. Patricia took a step back, her face pale. You should be careful, Grace. Some truths don't stay buried forever. And just like that, she turned and walked away, her heels echoing softly on the tile. I stood there, my pulse racing, staring after her, because I had no idea what she was talking about. But I could feel it. Something in her voice wasn't just fear. It was warning. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in my quiet little house felt amplified. The ticking clock, the wind against the window, the hum of the streetlights outside. And when I looked at my reflection in the mirror, my locket glinting softly in the dark, I finally admitted it to myself. Patricia knew something about my past, something I didn't even know existed. And whatever it was, I had a feeling it was about to destroy everything I thought I knew. I thought dinner was over. Plates were cleared, laughter softened into small talk, and the air felt lighter, until Patricia leaned back in her chair, eyes glittering like glass. So, she said, her voice syrupy and smooth, how can your daughter afford such a beautiful ring on a teacher's salary? The table froze. Even the chandelier light seemed to dim. Melissa's hand stiffened in midair, hovering above her glass. Daniel glanced at his mother, just for a second, but that second said everything. He knew she meant to wound. My heart started pounding so loud I could feel it echo in my ears. I smiled because that's what women like me are taught to do when they're cornered. Oh, you know how daughters are, I said lightly. They save, they dream, sometimes they even borrow a little for something special. Melissa's face flushed. Mom, she whispered, I didn't. But Patricia cut her off with a soft laugh, pretending she hadn't just detonated a grenade in the middle of the table. Of course, she murmured, waving her hand. I'm just curious. I worry when young couples start with expensive things they can't afford. It sets a tone, don't you think, Harold? Her husband adjusted his glasses and nodded without looking up. A tone indeed. Daniel tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. Mom, please, let's not. But she wasn't finished. She leaned closer, her pearls catching the light. You've raised such a charming daughter, she said to me, her tone wrapped in honey. You must be proud she married up, dear. The words hit harder than any slap. I saw Melissa's jaw tighten, her fork tremble, but I didn't react. I couldn't. Not yet. I smiled again, slowly, politely, and said, Pride doesn't come from who you marry, Patricia. It comes from who you are when the money disappears. Her lips twitched, just a fraction, but I saw fear flicker there, real human fear. That's when I noticed it. Her hand, resting near her glass of wine, was trembling, not from anger, from something else, something deeper. And for the first time all evening, I realized Patricia wasn't just cruel, she was nervous. Not about me, about what I might know. Dinner ended soon after that, with forced laughter and empty compliments. Melissa was quiet on the drive home, replaying every word, every glare. I didn't tell her what I saw, Patricia's hand shaking, her eyes darting to my necklace. That necklace, that old gold locket with my late husband's initials. She'd stared at it all night like it carried a secret she recognized. And maybe it did. That night, as I washed the smell of roasted lamb off my hands, one thought wouldn't leave me alone. Patricia wasn't mocking me. She was warning me. And the way she looked at my locket, that's when I realized there was another secret in the room, and it had my husband's name all over it. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my chest and the taste of unease still heavy in my mouth. Melissa had gone to work early. Her laughter from the night before was gone, replaced by silence. I knew I had to see Patricia again. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from her, short and polite. Coffee? My place. 2 p.m. Just us women. I almost laughed. Just us women, she said, as if we were girlfriends sharing recipes, not adversaries circling a buried truth. When I arrived, the house looked different in daylight. The perfection felt unnatural, like a museum of someone else's happiness. The scent of white roses filled the air, too strong, almost suffocating. Patricia greeted me at the door with a strained smile. Thank you for coming, she said. I nodded. Of course. We walked into the kitchen. It gleamed like it had never been used. Coffee brewed in silence. The only sound was the quiet hiss of the machine and the faint tick of an antique clock. Finally she spoke. You're not who you say you are you? The question was so blunt, I nearly dropped my cup. I laughed softly, pretending not to understand. Excuse me. Her eyes sharpened. Don't play innocent with me. That locket around your neck, where did you get it? I touched it instinctively. It belonged to my late husband. Her jaw tightened. What was his name? Edward, I said, careful to keep my voice calm. She nodded slowly, almost like she expected that answer. Edward Miles. The name hit the air like a loaded gun. Yes, I said quietly. She smiled, but her eyes were trembling. Then I was right. I frowned. Right about what? Patricia leaned forward, lowering her voice. Stay away from my family. Whatever game you're playing, whatever you're trying to uncover, stop it. I blinked. I don't understand. She stood abruptly, pacing near the counter. Her mask of grace was slipping. Don't lie to me. You think you can come back into Arlena's pretending to be harmless, pretending you don't know what happened. What happened? I asked softly. Her voice broke. You know damn well what your husband did to mine. The words hit like a thunderclap. My husband, Edward, he'd been kind, brilliant, moral to his bones. He couldn't have done anything wrong. But the way she said it, it wasn't anger. It was fear. She turned away, hands gripping the edge of the counter. "You should have stayed hidden," she whispered. "You have no idea what you've started." Then she looked back at me, eyes cold, tears forming. "If you love your daughter, stay away from us." I wanted to ask more, but the look in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't hatred anymore. It was warning. When I left her house, the sky had turned gray and the air smelled of rain. I walked slowly to my car, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I couldn't shake her words. "Whatever you're trying to uncover, stop it." I wasn't trying to uncover anything. At least not yet. But that night I couldn't sleep. Because Patricia was right about one thing. I wasn't who they thought I was. And maybe neither was she. That night I couldn't close my eyes. Because for the first time I realized Patricia knew something about my past. Something even I didn't. Perfect. We're now entering the dark discovery phase of your story. Chapters 7 and 8 mark the midpoint shift, where truth begins to surface and fear replaces curiosity. I'll maintain your cinematic tone. Emotionally grounded, suspense-heavy, and structured for maximum viewer retention. The next morning, the sky was dull and heavy, like it knew something I didn't. I sat at the kitchen table, untouched coffee cooling beside me, the echo of Patricia's voice still stuck in my head. "You have no idea what you've started." Every word clawed at me. She wasn't bluffing. There was something she knew about my husband, something she thought I had come to uncover. But what if she was right in another way? What if there really was something to uncover? By noon, curiosity had twisted into fear and fear into obsession. I opened my laptop. It started innocently. I typed Patricia and Harold Whitmore business into a search bar. Within seconds, hundreds of results appeared. Old financial records, charity photos, newspaper articles. Their faces smiled from gala events, fundraisers, luxury vacations. But then I found something stranger. A name. One I hadn't seen in years. Miles and Carter Holdings. My late husband's company. My pulse quickened. I clicked through old business archives, scanned names, cross-checked dates. And then there it was, a scan document from 20 years ago. Whitmore Industries acquires subsidiary rights from Miles and Carter Holdings following financial collapse. Financial collapse? That didn't make sense. When Edward died, he told me everything was stable. Our finances were clean, our savings untouched. The inheritance I received came later, from his old business partner, Mr. Carter. But according to these documents, Whitmore Industries, Patricia's family company, had been directly tied to the downfall of my husband's business. I scrolled faster, my fingers trembling. Buried in one article was a small line. A legal dispute followed between the two families, but details were sealed by private settlement. My heart froze. A settlement between my husband and the Whitmores? I felt my throat tighten. If Patricia knew about this, it would explain everything. Her anger, her fear, the way she stared at my necklace. But why act like I was the one hiding something? I opened another tab and searched for archive photos from the settlement period. The web page loaded slowly, pixel by pixel. When the image finally appeared, I couldn't breathe. There, in black and white, was my husband, smiling. And beside him, Patricia. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. They looked close. Familiar. Too familiar. The caption read, "Edward Miles and Patricia Whitmore attend corporate dinner, 1998. My blood ran cold. They'd known each other, not just professionally. There was something intimate in the way she looked at him. Something that shouldn't have been there. Had she loved him? Hated him? Both? I sat back, pressing a trembling hand against my lips. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. If Patricia once knew my husband, what else did she know about how he died? Because the way she said, "You don't know what he did to us," no longer sounded like accusation. It sounded like warning. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every sound in my house felt louder. The creak of the floorboards, the ticking of the old clock. When my phone buzzed at 1 a.m., I nearly screamed. It was an unknown number. One text. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. No name. No signature. But I knew who sent it. Patricia. And for the first time since Edward died, I felt truly afraid. But fear didn't stop me. It only made me dig deeper. And that's when I found the connection that shattered everything I thought I knew. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patricia's face, calm, poised, deadly. By morning, I wasn't just curious anymore. I was terrified. Still, I had to know. I couldn't let the fear win. I drove to the public records office downtown, a quiet building that smelled like dust and secrets. Rows of metal cabinets stretched into the distance, filled with files no one had touched in years. The clerk at the counter, an older man with tired eyes, glanced up. "Help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said softly. "I'm looking for archives on Miles and Carter Holdings, specifically anything tied to Whitmore Industries." He nodded and disappeared into the back. I waited, every second dragging like an hour. When he returned, he handed me a thin brown folder. "Not much survived from that case," he said. "Strange thing, most of it was sealed or destroyed. Only these old summaries remain." My stomach dropped. "Destroyed?" "Court order," he said, lowering his voice. "Private, family matter." I opened the folder slowly. Inside were yellowed pages, stapled clippings, fragments of contracts. One headline stood out. "Carter found dead amidst business scandal." Carter, my husband's partner, the man who'd supposedly left me that inheritance. I scanned the article with shaking hands. He hadn't died of illness like Edward told me. He'd been found drowned in a lake near the Whitmore estate. The police had ruled it an accident, but the note scribbled in the margin, probably from a journalist, said something else. Rumors of embezzlement. Possible cover-up. I stared at the words until they blurred. If Carter had been accused of embezzling, and the Whitmores were involved, then Edward must have been caught in the middle. And if that inheritance came from Carter's estate, no, it couldn't be. That money wasn't a gift. It was hush money. I stood abruptly, the room spinning. My husband hadn't died cleanly. He'd died with secrets buried beneath his name, and now they were resurfacing. As I gathered the papers, one loose photograph fell out. It was taken years ago, for people smiling at a dinner table. Edward, Carter, Harold, and Patricia. And there it was again. That look. Patricia's eyes on Edward. Soft. Familiar. Possessive. She wasn't just part of the business. She was involved. A sick feeling curled in my stomach. I left the office shaking, gripping the folder like a weapon. When I got home, I sat on the floor surrounded by old photos, receipts, and documents. The puzzle pieces began to align. Edward's accidental death. Carter's mysterious drowning. Patricia's hostility. The inheritance that showed up right after the settlement was sealed. It all pointed to one horrifying truth. I had been leaning off the profits of something dark. And Patricia knew it. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. Alone." No name. Just that. But I didn't need one. I knew exactly who it was. Patricia wanted to meet again. And if my gut was right, the next time we met, I wouldn't just learn the truth. I might not walk away from it. The cafe was quiet that afternoon. Too quiet. Rain tapped against the windows in soft, steady rhythms, blurring the world outside into shades of gray. I sat in the corner booth, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. My reflection trembled faintly in the window, a tired woman pretending to be calm. Then the door opened. Patricia stepped in. Her presence filled the room like perfume and poison, elegant, deliberate, and dangerous. She wore a gray coat, her hair pinned perfectly in place, but her eyes looked worn, almost haunted. She spotted me instantly. No smile, no greeting, just a short nod before she walked over and slid into the seat across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said softly, "I warned you to stop digging." "I couldn't," I whispered. "You knew my husband. You lied." Her lips tightened. "I didn't lie. I protected what was left of my family." I leaned forward. "From what?" Patricia's fingers trembled slightly as she set her purse down. "From the truth." Something about the way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. I waited, my breath held, as she stared out the window, rain streaking down the glass like tears. "When my brother, Carter, died," she began, "everything fell apart. Our company was drowning in debt. My husband was desperate. And Edward, he was brilliant but reckless. He saw a way out. A deal that would save both families." I frowned. "You mean the investment?" Patricia nodded. "Yes, the investment that never should have happened. Carter moved funds through Edward's accounts to keep our creditors quiet. He said it was temporary, but the money vanished, and so did he." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "You think my husband—" "I know," she said sharply. "Edward took the blame to protect you, to protect Melissa. Carter's death wasn't an accident, and Edward knew too much. He agreed to keep silent in exchange for your safety." My chest tightened. "No, that's not true. He would have told me." Patricia's expression softened, almost pitying. "He loved you too much to tell you." The air between us thickened with grief and disbelief. "I always thought you were innocent," she whispered. "But when I saw you at dinner wearing that locket, his locket, I couldn't breathe. That necklace belonged to my brother before he died." My hand flew to my chest. "That's impossible. Edward gave it to me." Her eyes darkened. "Then he took it from Carter's body." The words hit me like a blow. I couldn't speak, couldn't even move. "I hated you for years," Patricia said quietly. "But now I think we were both victims of the same man." Her voice broke on the last word. I saw tears shimmer in her eyes, tears that looked too heavy to hide. "I don't know what you want from me," I managed to say. She reached into her purse and slid a folded photograph across the table. "The truth." I hesitated, then opened it. It was an old photo, Edward and Carter in an office, laughing. On the back, written in faded ink, "For Patricia. Always." I looked up slowly. She wasn't lying. The cafe's air felt thinner now. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Patricia stood, her voice trembling. "If you really want answers, you'll find them in what he left behind. But be careful, dear. Truth doesn't always free us. Sometimes it buries us." She turned and walked away, her reflection vanishing into the rain. And as I sat there staring at that photo, I realized something terrifying. If what she said was true, then my entire life, every dollar, every comfort, every lie had been built on someone else's death. But I needed proof. And what I found next didn't just confirm her story, it destroyed the last piece of the man I thought I knew. That night, I tore through Edward's old study like a madwoman. Drawers slammed, papers scattered, the air filled with the scent of dust and old secrets. For years, I'd kept that room locked, untouched, sacred. But now I was desperate. I pulled open a cabinet I hadn't touched since his funeral. Inside were boxes of letters, contracts, and files marked confidential. And buried beneath them, a small envelope, yellowed with age, my name written on the front in his handwriting. My heart pounded. I tore it open. Inside was a letter. "My love, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't fix what I broke. I never wanted you to see this part of me, the part that made deals with men who didn't believe in honesty or grace." My hands shook. Carter was in trouble. He owed money he couldn't repay. Patricia begged me to help him. I thought I could. I moved some of our funds into his accounts to cover the losses. But someone found out. The money disappeared, and Carter didn't make it out alieni. I could barely breathe. They said I killed him. I didn't, but I didn't stop them from thinking it. I signed the settlement, took their silence, and built a lie around it. a lie big enough to protect you and Melissa. The inheritance you received wasn't a gift. It was what remained of that silence. Tears streamed down my face. If Patricia ever comes to you, don't hate her. She lost everything too. And if the truth ever reaches Melissa, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I loved her enough to burn everything for her future. The paper slipped from my hands. My knees gave out. I sat on the floor, sobbing, ugly, raw, and real. He had done it all to protect us. But in saving us, he damned himself. For so long, I believed his death was peaceful. Now I saw it for what it was, a quiet sacrifice buried beneath years of shame. I looked around the study at the walls lined with framed photos, smiling faces, family vacations, all lies, all masks. In the corner sat his old safe. I'd never opened it. With trembling hands, I turned the dial the way he used to. Click, click, click. The door swung open. Inside was a small velvet pouch. I reached in and pulled out another locket, identical to mine. Inside it, a photo of Patricia and Carter. That was the final proof. The two lockets had been a pair, and my husband had kept them both. I sank to the floor, clutching the lockets in both hands. For a moment, I could almost feel him there, whispering apologies I'd never hear. But beneath the grief, another emotion stirred, rage. All those years of silence, all those polite smiles from Patricia's family, all the judgment, the pity, the whispered lies. No more. I wiped my tears and stood, whispering to the empty room. You wanted silence, Edward, but I can't lenient it anymore. I would tell Melissa everything, even if it tore our family apart. I waited 3 long days before calling Melissa. 3 days of pacing my leaning room, rewriting my confession in my head, whispering lines I could never seem to finish aloud. Every hour felt like a storm I couldn't escape. I'd pick up my phone, stare at her name, and then lose the courage to press call. What do you even say to your own child when you've hidden a truth that can tear her marriage apart? By the 4th morning, I couldn't take the silence anymore. When she finally answered, her voice sounded distracted. Tired. Mom? Is everything okay? I swallowed. I need to see you, sweetheart. There's something I have to tell you. She hesitated. Daniel's parents are coming over tonight for dinner. Maybe you could join us. Her tone was hesitant, but it felt like a sign. Fate giving me one last shot to put everything on the table before the lies destroyed us all. The moment I pulled into their driveway, my stomach turned. The house looked too perfect. Soft lights in the windows, curtains drawn neatly, every brick screaming control. Melissa opened the door before I could knock. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were guarded. Mom, you look pale. Are you feeling okay? I just need to talk to you, I said quietly. To all of you. She frowned, confused, but led me inside. The dining table was already set with polished silverware, expensive wine glasses, and candles that flickered too neatly. It felt like a stage. Patricia and Harold sat across from each other, immaculate, calm, unreadable. Daniel stood behind Melissa, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder like he was already choosing a side. Dinner's almost ready, Melissa said, forcing cheer into her voice. Mom's joining us tonight. No one answered. The air was thick with unspoken history. I stayed standing for a moment, gripping my purse like a shield. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. I won't stay long, I began. I just need to tell you something that's been kept hidden too long. Patricia arched a brow, elegant and sharp. This sounds serious. It is, I said. It's about Edward, my husband. Melissa's face softened instantly. Dad. Yes. My throat tightened. And the reason we lost everything years ago. The reason Daniel's family blamed him. Daniel's posture stiffened. We've already talked about that, haven't we? Patricia smiled faintly. Yes, dear. Some things are better left in the past. I shook my head. Not when the past keeps poisoning the present. I pulled the folded letter from my purse and set it on the table. The paper was worn, edges soft from being held too many times. He wrote this before he died. It explains everything. Melissa leaned forward, but Daniel got to it first. He opened it with a practiced kind of aggression, eyes scanning line after line. His expression hardened. So this is it? Your proof, he asked. A letter from a man who's been gone 10 years. I kept my gaze steady. Yes, and it says he took the blame for something he didn't do. For something Carter did. Patricia's face didn't move, but her hands tightened on her wine glass. Melissa blinked. Carter? Your brother. Patricia smiled tightly. That's ridiculous. Carter had nothing to do with that. I turned to her. He did. Edward found out the embezzlement trail led back to him. He confronted him privately, and instead of letting Carter face prison, your father begged mine to stay silent. Edward agreed, thinking he was protecting your family's reputation. Daniel scoffed. And we're just supposed to take your word for it? No, I said. Take your father-in-law's. I pointed to the letter. He confessed. He covered it up so your family wouldn't collapse. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Melissa's voice broke the silence. Mom, is this real? I nodded, tears burning behind my eyes. Yes, I didn't know until last week. I found the letter in one of your father's old ledgers. Daniel's voice rose, hard and cold. So now you expect us to believe that our family, my uncle, my mother, were the real thieves? You think my father didn't suffer enough already? I think, I said slowly, that your mother's silence is her answer. All eyes turned to Patricia. Her expression stayed perfectly calm, but her jaw trembled slightly. We did what we had to do, she whispered. Our family was already drowning. Melissa's voice trembled. You knew? You knew Dad was innocent. Patricia looked at her daughter-in-law with a kind of weary sorrow. You don't understand what it means to lose everything. Sometimes survival demands silence. Melissa's hands flew to her mouth. You destroyed my father's name to protect yours. Daniel stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. That's enough. I won't sit here while you drag my family through the mud. But Melissa wasn't listening. She turned to me, eyes wet, desperate. How long have you known, Mom? Since last week, I whispered. I was trying to find the right way to tell you. She shook her head, backing away. The right way? There is no right way to hide something like this. Melissa. No, she said sharply. You should have told me. You should have trusted me. Her words hit like a blade. The one person I'd built my world around was looking at me like a stranger. Patricia stood up, smoothing her dress. It's late, she said softly. Harold, let's go. But before she left, she placed her hand lightly on my shoulder. Her nails pressed just enough to sting. Some debts can't be repaid, dear, she murmured. Only endured. Her perfume lingered even after she left. Sweet, suffocating. The door shut behind them, leaving only the three of us in the heavy quiet. Melissa's tears had stopped, but her expression was cold, almost empty. Daniel crossed his arms. You happy now? He asked. You got your drama. You turned dinner into a courtroom. I took a deep breath. Daniel, this isn't about you. The hell it isn't, he snapped. You just accused my family of ruining yours. Because they did, I said, and your mother's silence proved it. Melissa's voice cracked. Mom, stop. But something inside me had already broken free, the part that had swallowed humiliation for decades, the part that smiled politely through whispers of failure. You think I'm proud of this? I said, voice trembling. I've spent years leaning small, pretending we deserved the pain we got. I kept quiet so you could marry into this family without shame. And what did that buy me? A seat at a table where I'm barely tolerated. Daniel's eyes darkened. If you hate us so much, why come here at all? Because, I said, stepping closer. I love my daughter too much to let her drown in lies. He flinched, but didn't back away. You think love looks like this? I turned to Melissa. No, sweetheart. Love looks like telling the truth, even when it costs you everything. She covered her face with her hands. I can't do this right now. Please just go. Her voice was small, fragile, the same tone she used as a child when thunderstorms scared her. Only this time I was the storm. I wanted to hold her, but she stepped back. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my gold locket, the one Edward gave me when she was born. Inside was a picture of him holding her as a baby, his thumb brushing her cheek. I set it on the table. Keep this, I whispered. It's your father's truth, even if you can't hear mine yet. She stared at it, silent. Daniel said nothing, only stood between us like a wall. I turned toward the door, each step heavier than the last. The hallway seemed longer than it used to. I could hear the faint hum of the baby monitor upstairs, soft, steady, innocent. Life moving on without me. When I reached the porch, I stopped and looked back. Melissa hadn't moved. The candlelight behind her flickered across her face, shadow and light shifting like indecision. For a second, I thought she might call out. She didn't. I stepped outside into the cold night. The air bit my skin, sharp as truth. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys. I pressed them against my chest, whispering to no one. Please don't let this be the end. Inside the house, the lights dimmed one by one. From the car window, I saw Patricia's car parked just down the street, engine running, headlights off. She had been watching, waiting. A chill ran through me. Her silence at the table wasn't mercy, it was strategy. And by morning, she would reach out again, this time with something I never expected. Because while I thought I'd lost my daughter forever, Patricia was already rewriting the story. And the next call I received from her would change everything. It's strange how quiet the world feels after you lose something you can't replace. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and that ache in my chest that comes after too many tears and too little sleep. The house was still, the air heavy with loneliness. My phone sat silent on the kitchen counter. No missed calls. No texts. Melissa hadn't reached out. The sunlight creeping through the blinds felt cruel. Too bright. Too normal for the way my world had cracked open. I made myself coffee I couldn't drink and sat at the table, staring at the gold locket's empty space on my neck. The mark where it used to rest was pale and tender, like my heart after too much truth. I told myself I'd done the right thing, but right doesn't always mean painless. Around noon, the phone finally buzzed. For a heartbeat, hope surged through me. I snatched it up, expecting Melissa's name. It wasn't her. Patricia. My pulse jumped. I didn't answer. The call stopped. Then a message appeared. You should come to the lake house. We need to finish what we started. I stared at the screen for a long time. Finish what we started. I didn't know if it was a threat, a confession, or an invitation. But the phrasing chilled me. I set the phone face down. I wasn't ready to face her again. Not after the chaos she'd helped ignite. The following days blurred together. Melissa didn't call. Daniel didn't either. I tried visiting her once, but when I parked near her house, I saw Daniel's car in the driveway and a second pair of headlights pull up behind me. Patricia's black sedan. She was there again, watching. Always watching. I drove home, my hands shaking the whole way. I couldn't decide which hurt more, my daughter's silence or Patricia's shadow following me everywhere I turned. By the end of the week, I found myself wandering through the small downtown park near my house. I hadn't planned on seeing anyone, but as fate would have it, I ran into Lena, my old friend from the hospital volunteer days. She spotted me sitting on the bench and didn't even hesitate. She just sat down, no words, no judgment. She had that rare kind of presence that didn't demand explanations. After a while, she said softly, "You look like someone who's been walking barefoot on glass." I let out a shaky laugh. That obvious? She smiled faintly. You always carried yourself like you could handle anything. What happened? So I told her. Not everything, but enough. About the letter, the confrontation, the silence that followed, and Patricia's cryptic message. Lena listened without interruption. When I finished, she leaned back and looked at the clouds. Truth, she said finally, has a funny way of showing up when it's least convenient. I thought telling Melissa would bring us closer, I admitted. Instead, it broke everything. She nodded slowly. Because you told the truth alone. You didn't give her the chance to discover it with you. You gave her a storm without shelter. Her words stung, but they made sense. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Every creak of the house felt amplified. Every shadow seemed alien-y. Around 11:30, my phone lit up again. Another message from Patricia. You think you've told her everything. You haven't. Meet me tomorrow at the lake house. Come alone. For a long time, I stared at that message, my stomach twisting with dread. I almost deleted it, but something about her tone, desperate, maybe even frightened, made me pause. I thought of Edward's letter, of the secrets still buried beneath his words, and against my better judgment, I decided to go. The lake house sat just outside of town, tucked behind a row of pine trees. It had belonged to Patricia's parents, I remembered vaguely. I hadn't been there in decades. The air was heavy with fog when I arrived, thick and cold, curling around the water like smoke. The silence was suffocating. I parked near the dock, the crunch of gravel echoing in the stillness. The front door was cracked open, a slither of dim light spilling out. I hesitated. Patricia! I called. No answer. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. A kettle hissed quietly on the stove. Patricia was sitting at the dining table, perfectly composed, but her face looked pale, almost ghostly under the yellow light. You came, she said softly. Good. I stayed standing. Why am I here? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the chair across from her. Sit. Please. Her tone wasn't hostile this time. It was weary, fragile even. When I finally sat, she poured 2 cups of tea, her hands trembling. I wasn't honest the last time we spoke, she said. About your husband. About Carter. About everything. I felt my chest tighten. Then tell me the truth now. She stared into her cup. Carter wasn't the only one moving money through Edward. There was someone else. Someone higher. My throat went dry. Who? She looked up, her eyes glassy. My father. I froze. Your father? But he was already retired. He wasn't innocent, she cut in. He orchestrated everything. Carter was his pawn. Edward tried to protect you, protect your family, but in doing so, he took the fall for a crime my father planned. I could barely process the words. Why are you telling me this now? Patricia's eyes filled with tears. Because I'm dying and I'm tired of leaning inside lies. You deserve to know that your husband wasn't protecting guilt. He was protecting you from my family's shame. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything I thought I knew, the guilt, the secrecy, the pain, twisted into something else entirely. So the inheritance was real, she said. Your husband made sure you received it because he knew my family would never confess. It was his way of giving you justice, quietly. I sat in stunned silence. Patricia wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. But there's something else you should know. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Melissa's husband, Daniel, he knows. He's known for months. My stomach turned cold. What? He found old files in my father's archives. He confronted me about them. That's why he pushed Melissa to distance herself from you. He wanted to keep it buried. I gripped the edge of the table. Why would he protect that? Patricia's voice broke. Because if the truth gets out, the inheritance could be traced back to you, to Edward, and it could ruin their marriage, his career, everything. He told me he'd do whatever it takes to keep it silent. The room spun. For a moment, I thought I might faint. "Patricia," I whispered, "why are you telling me all this?" She looked at me then, truly looked, her eyes hollow but human. "Because your daughter deserves to know what love looks like when it's honest. And I never gave that to mine." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'm sorry for what I did to you." For the first time, I saw not a villain, but a woman haunted by the same ghosts that had chased me for years. I reached across the table, hesitated, then placed my hand over hers. "I forgive you," I said quietly, "but this isn't over." Her lips trembled. "No," she said, "it's only beginning." The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my front door. No name, no address, just one line written in neat handwriting. "Don't trust her. She's playing both sides." Inside was a printed photo, blurry, grainy, clearly taken at night. Patricia at the lake house, on the phone, and beside her, Daniel. My heart dropped. Everything I thought I'd begun to understand twisted again into something darker. I looked out my window, half expecting to see a car parked across the street. But the road was empty, too empty, and for the first time since this began, I realized this wasn't just about money or guilt anymore. Someone was orchestrating every move, and I was standing right in the center of it. I thought I was uncovering my husband's past, but now I was beginning to suspect someone wanted me gone before I found the truth. It had been 3 days since the envelope arrived. 3 days of pacing between anger and confusion, of wondering who had taken that photo and why. I hadn't slept much. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps outside. Every passing car made my pulse race. Paranoia, maybe, or intuition. On the 4th evening, just as the sky melted into a deep violet, I heard a soft knock on the door. Not frantic, not threatening, measured, familiar. When I opened it, Patricia stood there, pale, thinner than before, her hands clutching something wrapped in a square of dark velvet. "May I come in?" she asked quietly. My instinct screamed no, but something in her eyes, that flicker of exhaustion, maybe regret, made me step aside. She entered slowly, her breath shallow. Up close, she looked ill. Her skin had that faint yellow tint that hinted at something serious. She noticed my gaze and offered a sad half-smile. "Lean at her cancer," she said simply. "Stage 4. They say I have months." The words hung heavy in the air. I didn't know what to say. Patricia had been many things, manipulative, secretive, cruel, but in that moment she looked like a ghost of her former self. She placed the velvet bundle on my kitchen table and slid into a chair, wincing as she sat. "I'm sorry to come uninvited," she said softly, "but I didn't know how else to do this. I made tea out of habit, though my hands trembled too much to pour neatly." As the kettle hissed, she stared around the kitchen. Her eyes lingered on the family photographs, Melissa as a little girl, me and Edward laughing in the backyard. "You kept them all," she murmured. "Of course," I said. "They're my life." She nodded slowly. "I used to think photographs were just decorations. Now I see they're anchors, proof that we were real." I sat across from her. "Why are you here, Patricia?" She touched the velvet cloth gently. "Because there's one last thing you need to know." When she unfolded the fabric, I saw an envelope sealed with wax, deep red, slightly cracked at the edges. "This was given to me by Edward," she said, "years ago, before he died." My breath caught. "Edward gave you a letter?" "Yes. He said if the truth ever began to resurface, I'd know when to Delana it." I didn't understand what he meant then. Now I do. She slid it toward me. "It's yours." I hesitated. The envelope looked ancient, fragile, the edges stained faintly yellow. My name was written across the front in Edward's handwriting. Margaret. My throat tightened. I hadn't seen that handwriting in over 20 years. "Why didn't you give this to me sooner?" I asked quietly. Because I didn't want you to know what he'd done, she said. And later, I didn't want to face what I'd done. I didn't open the letter right away. Something about it terrified me, as if whatever was inside would undo everything I'd rebuilt in my mind. Instead, I looked at Patricia. Tell me something first. The photo I received, you and Daniel at the lake house, was it real? Her face went still. Then she exhaled. Yes. He came to see me after you left. He wanted to know what I'd told you. He was afraid. Afraid of what? That the truth would ruin him. Ruin Melissa. My chest tightened. He's still hiding something. Patricia didn't respond immediately. Then she said softly, maybe. Or maybe he's just trying to protect the same way Edward did, by keeping secrets that destroy love. Her voice trembled. I've done terrible things out of fear. Daniel is doing the same. We sat in silence. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock, slow and steady, like a heart refusing to stop. Finally, she whispered, You know, Margaret, I hated you for years. I told myself you stole from my family. But it wasn't hate. It was envy. You built something we couldn't buy, peace. Her voice cracked. I never had peace. Not once. I swallowed hard. You can still find it. She gave a faint, broken laugh. No, my time's almost up, but maybe I can give you a chance to find yours. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the small gold locket I'd lost weeks ago, the one that had disappeared the night of the first dinner. My breath hitched. Where did you? She placed it gently on the table. Daniel found it that night. He gave it to me. I kept it because I thought if you knew what it symbolized, you'd start digging again. And you did. Her eyes met mine, hollow but honest. I'm sorry for every cruel thing I said to you. I can't undo the past, but I can tell the truth. I didn't trust myself to speak. My fingers closed around the locket. It felt warm, as if it remembered. When Patricia stood, her balance faltered. I caught her arm instinctively. Are you sure you're okay to drive? I asked. She smiled faintly. I didn't drive. My stomach turned cold. Then how did you? Before I could finish, a pair of headlights swept across the living room window. A car engine idled outside. Patricia's gaze flicked toward it. My son drove me. I frowned. You mean Daniel? She hesitated. He doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm delanering something else. I stepped toward the window, but the glare was too bright to see the driver clearly. When I turned back, Patricia was at the door again. Read the letter when you're ready, she said. It's the only truth that matters now. Then she looked at me. Truly looked, like a woman standing on the edge of forgiveness. Tell Melissa I tried to make it right. And then she left. I watched from the doorway as she walked slowly toward the car. The fog had started to thicken again, swallowing her silhouette. The door opened, she slipped inside, and the car rolled away down the narrow street, taillights fading like embers. I stood there long after the sound disappeared. Something about the whole exchange felt wrong. Too clean, too final. When I went back inside, the kitchen smelled faintly of her perfume, lavender and cedar, and beside the untouched teacup, under the velvet cloth, lay another slip of paper I hadn't noticed before. A hospital card. St. Mark's Oncology Unit. Patient. Patricia Halden. But the date printed on it was almost 3 months old. And in the corner, in faint pencil, someone had written, Discharged, deceased. I dropped the card, my pulse roaring in my ears. Deceased? That wasn't possible. I'd just spoken to her. She'd been here, frail, trembling, real. I looked at the letter again. Edward's handwriting glowed softly in the lamplight, waiting. My hands shook as I picked it up. I wanted to open it right then, but fear held me back. Because suddenly, one question burned through every other thought. If Patricia was already dead, then who had just been in my house? The letter trembled in my hands, but I couldn't open it. Not yet, because for the first time, I wasn't sure whether the truth waiting inside was meant to free me or destroy me. The clock ticked louder that night. Every sound felt sharper. The creak of the floorboards, the low hum of the refrigerator, even the rain brushing against the windows like fingertips. I sat at the table, staring at the letter. Edward's handwriting stared back. Familiar, elegant, final. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. The smell of old paper hit me, faint cedar and dust, like the attic of a memory I'd sealed away long ago. The letter unfolded in slow motion. His words bled across the page in that same steady cursive I'd loved once, the one that signed birthday cards and business contracts alike. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, it means I failed to protect the truth. Or perhaps you found it anyway. There are things I've carried that should have been spoken long ago, but silence became easier than guilt. When Melissa was a baby, I made a choice that changed everything. Patricia and I were business partners before we were friends. I trusted her too much. One year, the company hit a wall. We were months from bankruptcy. A client offered a way out, but it required something unthinkable, shifting investments under Patricia's family trust. I signed it. The money wasn't clean. And when it was discovered, I took the fall to protect her. But here's the truth that never left my chest. Patricia wasn't protecting me when she came back into Arlena's. She was protecting herself, because that hidden trust still exists. The one that cost me everything. The irony? It's worth more now than we ever imagined. I never wanted Melissa to know. I didn't want her to carry the stain of our choices. But if you're reading this, the trust is still active, and so is the danger that comes with it. The account is under your name, not hers. It's the same money that fueled everything, the money that built their mansion, their business, and their pride. Forgive me for the lies. I only wanted to keep our daughter safe. But if you ever decide to open the vault, remember, Patricia will do anything to stop you. Edward. I couldn't breathe. The paper slipped from my hands, fluttering onto the table like something alien-y. The trust, my name, their mansion, their business. It all made sense. The way Patricia had looked at me, the way Daniel had panicked when I started asking questions. All this time, they hadn't been protecting me. They'd been protecting what was mine. The inheritance wasn't emotional, it was literal. Millions, maybe, buried in accounts tied to my name. I felt sick. Every time Patricia called me naive, every sneer about my simple life, it was because she knew. She'd built her empire on my silence. The storm outside deepened. Thunder rolled across the hills, shaking the windows. I grabbed my phone, opened my online banking app, and typed in one of the old account numbers Edward used to reference. It had been dormant for decades. My hands trembled as the page loaded. Then I saw it. Balance. $12,440,000. I gasped. My heart pounded so violently it hurt. There it was. Proof. $12 million, sitting untouched, quietly gathering dust under my name. My reflection in the screen didn't look like me anymore. I looked like someone who'd just stumbled upon a secret big enough to burn Lena's down. A notification buzzed. An unknown number. Unknown, did you find it? My throat went dry. I typed back before thinking. Me, who is this? The dots appeared. Stopped. Appeared again. Unknown. Some things are better left buried. Margaret. The phone slipped from my hand. I stared at the letter again. At Edward's signature. Smooth, deliberate, almost peaceful. Was this his warning? Or was this the beginning of something bigger than both of us? The storm knocked out the power an hour later. The house went dark, except for the faint blue glow of the phone screen. I lit a candle and sat by the window, listening to the wind tear through the trees. In the flickering light, the letter seemed to breathe. Every memory came rushing back. The arguments, the nights Edward came home late, Patricia's calculated charm, her sudden reappearances after his death. And now all of it led here. A fortune. A lie. And a woman who'd returned from the dead, or something worse. At 1:13 a.m., there was another knock. 3 times. Slow. Heavy. I froze. The front door creaked, slightly in the wind, the handle rattling just enough to sound intentional. My heart pounded in my ears. The candle flickered violently. Then a voice, faint, muffled through the wood. "Margaret, open the door." It was Patricia's voice, but I had the hospital card in my pocket. Discharged, deceased. My whole body went cold. She called again, softer this time, like a lullaby. "Please. I just need to explain." I backed away, step by step. My hand reached for my phone, but the signal was gone. The letter lay open on the table, and the wind blew through the chimney, scattering the edges. Another knock, louder, the sound of nails scratching the wood. "Don't make the same mistake, Margaret," the voice whispered. "You don't know who's really behind it." The candle went out. When the lights came back hours later, dawn had broken, pale and weak through the windows. The door was wide open. A trail of wet footprints led from the porch to the letter, and stopped there. No sign of anyone else. No car outside. No noise but the wind and the steady hum of the refrigerator returning to life. But the letter was gone. Only the wax seal remained, melted into the table like blood. I sat there for a long time, shaking. Had I imagined it? Was it grief, exhaustion, fear? Or had Patricia, or whatever she'd become, come to take back what was never hers to begin with? I picked up the velvet cloth she'd left earlier. It felt heavier now. Inside was a small brass key, old, engraved with the initials HD. Edward hadn't mentioned a vault location in his letter, only that it existed. HD Holden Trust. I whispered it under my breath. Then I realized something chilling. The same initials were etched into the family crest outside Daniel's parents' mansion, the estate where Melissa leaned now. The vault wasn't some offshore account. It was there, in their house. I folded the key in my palm, my pulse racing. Patricia's words echoed in my mind. You don't know who's really behind it. If she was telling the truth, then the Holden family wasn't protecting the money. They were protecting whoever, or whatever, built it. The morning light was sharp, almost too clean for the kind of truth I was about to face. I hadn't slept. I'd spent hours replaying Edward's letter in my mind, tracing the outlines of his words, the wax seal, the missing pages. And then there was the key, that small, cold piece of brass that now felt like it weighed 100 pounds. HD, Holden Trust. The same initials carved into the gate of Daniel's family estate. The same crest embroidered on Patricia's napkins, etched into the silverware, even carved above their fireplace like a silent oath. It was all connected. When I pulled up to the house that afternoon, the world looked deceptively normal. Birds chirped. The sprinklers clicked. The Holden mansion stood tall, its white pillars gleaming in the autumn sun. I parked at the edge of the driveway, same spot as the night of that dinner, and for a moment I just sat there. My reflection in the rearview mirror didn't look like a mother anymore. It looked like someone who'd seen too much. I took a deep breath, clutching the velvet cloth in my lap. Inside it, the brass key pressed against my palm. Melissa opened the door. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't slept either. "Mom," she whispered, voice breaking slightly. "I didn't know you were coming." "I had to," I said softly. "There's something I need to show you." She stepped aside. I could smell the faint scent of lavender candles, the same kind she used as a teenager whenever she was nervous. But underneath that was something else, something metallic, like old dust. We walked into the living room. Patricia's portrait still hung above the mantel, eyes sharp, mouth tight, as if even the paint remembered resentment. Daniel wasn't home, thank God. It was just us. I placed the key on the table. "Your father left this for me," I began. "And it connects to this house." Melissa frowned, confused. "To this house? Mom, what are you talking about?" I told her everything, slowly, deliberately. The inheritance, The hidden trust. Patricia's brother. The letter. Her face went pale halfway through. And when I mentioned the vault, she froze completely. She whispered, There's a locked room in the basement. Daniel told me never to go in there. My stomach twisted. Can you show me? I asked. She hesitated, looked toward the hallway, then nodded. We descended the stairs together, the air growing colder, heavier with each step. The basement was spotless, but unnervingly quiet. A single light bulb hummed overhead, casting long shadows across the cement floor. Then we saw it, a door, iron, bolted, with a small, circular keyhole right in the center. The initials were there, faint but unmistakable. HT. Melissa stepped back. Mom, what is this? I didn't answer. I slid the brass key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The metal clicked, low and final. The door opened with a sigh. Dust billowed out, thick and old. Inside was a narrow hallway, lined with metal cabinets and file boxes. Everything labeled, dated, the oldest one from 1992. I stepped inside first, my heart pounding in my throat. The first box I opened was full of papers, contracts, receipts, photos. And then, near the bottom, a photograph made my hand go numb. It was Edward, smiling, shaking hands with a man I didn't recognize. Behind them, Patricia stood, younger, sharper, with that same cold confidence I'd seen at dinner. Melissa leaned in, whispering, Is that Grandpa? I nodded slowly. That's him. The date on the photo, October 19th, 1992. Same day Edward supposedly left for his final business trip. The one he never returned from. The next box was worse. It contained bank documents, massive transfers, all signed under my husband's name, except one. The signature wasn't his. It was Daniel's, my son-in-law. Mom, Melissa's voice shook. Why would Daniel's name be on this? I couldn't answer. My mind was spinning. The inheritance, the business, Patricia's fear, the texts, it all pointed here. Daniel had known all along. He'd married my daughter not just out of love, but to control what I didn't even know I had. The Halden Trust wasn't just old money. It was dirty money, and the people guarding it would do anything to keep it. I turned toward the back wall, where something shimmered faintly in the half-dark. It was another safe, smaller this time, and hanging beside it, a single brass plaque engraved with words that sent chills through me. For her protection, I used the same key. The lock groaned, then opened. Inside was a small black box, and inside that the locket. My locket. The one Edward gave me before he died. But this one was different. It was heavier, colder. When I opened it, instead of our wedding photo, there was a tiny folded note. If you're reading this, they found you. Don't trust anyone, not even family. Melissa stepped back, her face pale as paper. Mom, what does that mean? I looked at her, my heart breaking, because I didn't know if I could protect her from what was coming. All I knew was that the truth wasn't finished with us. Melissa, I whispered, my voice shaking, we need to leave this house. But before we could move, we heard it, the sound of the front door opening upstairs. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, familiar. Melissa's eyes widened. She mouthed a single word. Daniel. I grabbed her hand. Stay quiet, I whispered. The footsteps came closer. Down the hall. Toward the basement door. Then his voice, calm, almost too calm. Melissa? Mom. You down here? He knew. The steps grew louder. I shoved the letter, the locket, and the note into my bag. My pulse roared in my ears. Then silence. The air went still. A moment later, his voice floated down the stairs again. Lower this time, sharper. You shouldn't have opened it. The light bulb flickered. And just like that, darkness. That's where it ended. That moment. That sound of my daughter's gasp in the dark, his footsteps closing in, and the truth finally catching up with us. I still don't know what happened next. Not exactly. I just know that when I woke up, the basement was empty. and the letter was gone again. People always say money reveals who people truly are, but they never tell you what truth costs when you've been leaning in its shadow for decades. My name is Margaret Hale, and I used to think I was a poor, simple woman who'd lost everything. Now I know I was just leaning someone else's lie. And the worst part, that lie isn't over. That night, as I packed my things to leave town, I got an email notification. The sender's name froze my blood. From Edward Hale, subject: "We need to talk before they find Melissa." The clock on my wall stopped at that exact second, and I realized sometimes the dead don't stay gone. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have opened that door? Would you have kept the money, or walked away from it all? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if you want to know what happens next, when Edward's email uncovers the final secret, then make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this story, it's just getting started. This is Margaret's truth. But next time we'll hear his.